Yeah, and I read some. They weren't early excerpts. Right? I read some reporting that Biden. The three things he's going to talk about is one, passing the torch, that he was a transitional president, and Kamala's ready for this moment as she is. He was going to hype up everything they've done so far, right? All the accomplishments, allow Kamala to run on that stuff too. Obviously, she was part of the administration. And the third thing was he was going to talk about Trump as being a threat to democracy. Um, Using Biden here is interesting. Do I think Walls will talk about it? Yes. Do I think Clinton, Barack will talk about it? Maybe a little bit, but Barack, I remember him campaigning in 2020, and I get it, but he's never really said, um, I think, what he truly feels about Donald Trump. I think he has to kind of put lipstick on it, but I expect Biden to take the most kind of shots at Trump. And yes, do I want him to have his moment? Do I want him to get his flowers? Do I want him to pass the torch? Yes. But using him could also help you open the door to kind of maybe taking shots at Trump that you don't want Kamala taking, right? You don't want Kamala mentioning that he was found liable for rape, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you do, but me personally, I'd rather have Kamala get her flowers that night as opposed to be a Trump hit artist. And maybe you use Biden and your surrogates for that. So that's what I'm expecting out of Biden. I understand your point about Hillary. I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, she didn't speak in 2020. Part of it was we didn't have a conventional convention, play on words there, but it was all kind of digital with virtual with COVID. So she's very popular amongst them. Also to remind people, right? I just talked about it. Like, hey, I could have been the first one, but Kamala definitely deserves it. Let's get it to her, right? Barack, I talked about it pre-show, but I think it's in my mind. I want Barack to close the whole show. Obviously, that has to be Kamala. It has to be her. And the vice president nominee should be the day before. But I don't know. This is interesting. I think Barack is looking at this moment. Um, I don't know. He's great in a lot of great speeches, but this is a moment where you could maybe patch some things with Biden. I know there's some drama going on behind the scenes. I'm sure they'll fix it after, but patch some things with Biden, kind of commend him on that, and then open the door. Remember, he was the first black president, and now he could kind of pass the torch himself to the second black president, right? So there's a lot of kind of passing of the torches here. Wednesday, it's funny because I think Bill and Tim get along. They're probably attracting the same Nebraskans and and people from Arkansas and stuff like that. I expect Tim to take some shots at Trump, take some shots at Vance, um, and go from there. But as far as Kamala, this is the most important speech of her career. She obviously spoke at the convention in 2020, but again, with virtual, it's different, right? There's no crowd; it's completely different. So this is going to be the most important speech of her career, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to um, how she is, what they write for her. I'm big on presidential speech writers, John. I'm very, very nostalgic about that. I know me and you talk about that kind of stuff all the time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what angle they take. I expect to see. She's already hinted at it. I expect to see something along the lines of the Democratic Party is full of people like me and Tim, where one guy grew up in the Midwest and he has a rifle and he has a dog and he was a teacher and he was a football coach. And I grew up in quote unquote inner city and I grew up with mixed race, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here we are on the same ticket. And that's the American dream. I expect to see something like that as well.
Yeah, let's go back. One of the things I want to tell everybody, and I'm not sure if you've ever had a chance to see some of it. I do not want people, and I'm of a certain age. I know some of our listeners are significantly younger. I do not want people to sleep on Bill Clinton. I've always said if you want to make a ton of money, you put Bill Clinton and Barack Obama on the speaking tour. Um, Before, and they have different styles. Bill Clinton can take complex issues and break them down in just plain English. You know, Bill Clinton, like when Bush was going with tax cuts and everything else, Bill Clinton was explaining what those tax cuts meant in real terms. He told you how many fewer teachers you get, how many fewer police officers you get. The man, and now he's older. I don't think he's as old as Biden, but the man is older. He's probably not as sharp as he used to be, But I will tell you, Bill Clinton, back in the day in the '90s, we used to call him the big dog. And you've heard that phrase, "Let the big dog hunt." That literally is how we referred to Bill Clinton, because he really was a big dog. He'd get a little southern accent. He'd tell you, "I feel your pain," and he'd just sit there. Now, I will show you, and I will tell you guys, if you get a chance, and uh, Fadi, I'll send you the link on this. Um, Coretta Scott King died sometime during George W. Bush's administration, and there was a funeral for her. It was a true homegoing celebration, black church, and all the living presidents were there. It was George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton, and they were polite to both Bushes, but and this is obviously a black church, but when they introduced Bill Clinton, the way that the crowd just lost their mind was insane. And the way that he literally at a funeral, one of the best speeches, he had, the crowd was hyped. They had him laughing and everything else. And he stopped on a dime and got serious. It was one of the best transitions I've ever seen. And I'm just telling you, do not sleep on Bill Clinton. I want to say a little bit more about Hillary, and I loved how you were breaking down the passing of the torch. Is that starting out with starting out with Hillary and Biden on the first night, Obama the second night. It's great scripting. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but Biden passing the torch to the entire younger generation. Biden big upping his vice president. Hillary, in many ways, and we talked about this before, how when we always talk about the 53% of white women who voted for Trump, I guarantee you that especially when you look at like how Shannon Watts and other people just balled out. I guarantee you that there's a lot of white women who are saying this is the last year to 53%. Now, granted, those numbers went up in 2020, but I think they see. To your point, I think there's a lot of avenging of Hillary, and so it's Hillary who's the only other woman who knows what Vice President Harris is going through. And I mean and then Obama, so Biden passing the generational torch, right? Biden passing the generational torch, big upping his vice president. Hillary passing the torch as I almost got there. Kamala's going to get there, and Obama passing the torch of, you always say Vice President Harris, you're not, you're the first, you're not going to be the last. Well, now I was the first, and I'm ready not to be the last. That's your first three. That's your first three speeches. I mean, just there's going to be a shit ton more speeches. Conventions have tons of speeches, and then, like you say, it's going to be the best speech ever. Or I won't say I shouldn't say it's going to be. I don't put that pressure on it, but it's going to be our most important speech. I look forward to hearing. I believe Pelosi speaking. I hope that Pete gets a speaking role. I hope that Shapiro gets a speaking role. I would encourage everyone. Um, you may want to watch it online, or you may want to watch it on C-SPAN, because unfortunately, during the show starts, I think 5 or 6, and there's a lot of speakers. The the cables, even the broadcast, only carry what, the last hour, last 2 hours. So there's some undercard speeches that people are going to see, and don't forget now, this has changed a little bit, but I don't know who's technically doing the keynote. I don't know if we have a keynote. Now, just so you guys know, and both Fadi and the listeners, I'm now going to give you guys sort of a tutorial on political campaigns or political conventions. Traditionally, it's usually Tuesday night or Wednesday night. The the presidential nominee, usually picks a person to deliver the keynote. And in 1988, Mike Dukakis picked Bill Clinton to deliver the keynote. Mike Dukakis lost. 4 years later, Bill Clinton became president. In 2004, John Kerry picked Barack Obama to give the keynote. 4 years later, Barack Obama became the president. And when Barack Obama gave that speech in 2004, um, I could just I do a lecture on it at Columbia College Chicago, but when he gave that speech in 2004, people were literally calling me like, "That's our next president." I mean, and he actually, in my opinion, Obama won the presidency in 2004. I say it all to say, I actually don't know, with us having such a stacked roster, if we're technically even having a keynote this year. You know, if we, I do not know. One of my friends does advance for um the convention speeches. I'll have to ask him. It's actually a couple. It's them. I'll have to ask them. You know, it's where Kevin and Kitty. Um, I have to ask them: is there a keynote this year? So that's the first thing to look for. Is that there's a lot more speeches than the ones we've just talked about, and in addition to the ones that are heavily anticipated, look for the one or two people that have a following but not a big following, and who people fall in love with that night, right? Secondly, those of us at the convention, we do not walk into the arena with signs. And I say this all that when Barack Obama gave his speech in 2004, most of the convention hall, with the exception of the people from Illinois, did not know who he was. You would not know that by watching on TV, because when he walks on stage, the entire arena was holding up Barack Obama signs. Now, how does that happen? What happens is they print up everybody who's speaking, they print up their signs, and right before they speak, they pass them out. And that's why, and so what's really funny is being at the airport on Friday and watching everybody literally with about a 6-inch stack of signs under their arm trying to get on the plane. So now this is a new convention. Maybe they don't do it that way anymore, but previously that's how they did it. The convention is an all day thing. Everybody sees the prime time, but for those of you watching, who, especially those of you in Chicago who are going to be here during the day at McCormick Place, there's going to be a number of panel discussions, workshops, events happening at McCormick Place. But then there are also going to be a number of events happening throughout the city, panel discussions, uh, press conferences. I was telling Fady, I was just finishing up the bosses. I've already gotten the bosses schedule, but I'm actually putting it into my calendar, because that way I'll be able to know, without having to go to the document, right, where we're going. I'm just going to literally just have it pop up in my, you know. But it's not unusual for some people, especially members of Congress during a convention, to have, during the daytime hours, before we even get to night, during the daytime hours, to have one event per hour. And then, just so you know, after the convention, there's parties. So my day during the convention is going to start around 7, between 7 and 8, and my day will end between midnight and 2 a.m. And I'll do that for really 5 days, because starting on Sunday, this is dropping on Monday, uh, we got to have all of our welcome parties. So it's going to be quite the show.